The iron bars bit into her wrists every time she shifted, the cold chains clinking against concrete. The little girl's sobs echoed through the basement, muffled by the suffocating damp that smelled of mold, rust, and forgotten lives. Her voice cracked with desperation, whispering words that dissolved into the darkness, begging for someone, anyone, to hear her. She was no older than 11, her hair matted, her dress torn, her eyes swollen from tears that had long since dried but never stopped flowing in her heart. She pulled against the cage door until their skin split, but the lock remained unyielding, mocking her innocence with its silence. And then came the sound, heavy boots on wooden planks above her, the vibration of authority moving closer. For the first time in what felt like forever, her small body froze, not in fear but in hope. The officers had no idea what they were about to uncover. They thought they were answering a routine call, just another disturbance in an old neighborhood where shadows clung to brick walls and whispers of crime never truly died. But behind that rotting door, beneath the floorboards, lay the truth that would split their hearts open. One officer, a man who carried more than just the weight of his badge, felt it before he saw it. His instincts, honed not only from years in law enforcement, but from years in another life, guided him. He had once worn a different uniform, the kind stitched with honor and sacrifice, the kind that demanded he bury friends and carry silence heavier than any weapon. His name was Marcus Hale, though few called him by it. To most, he was just the officer. But inside, he was a soldier who had long since learned that strength is often quieter than noise. Marcus's gaze lingered on the basement door longer than the others. The peeling paint, the faint metallic tang in the air, the way silence seemed to thicken as if it wanted to keep secrets buried. He recognized it. War zones had taught him that suffering had a smell, and he could smell it here. When they pried open the door and descended into the shadows, the world shifted. The girl looked up, her tiny hands reaching through the cage, her lips trembling as she tried to form words but could only sob. The moment their eyes met, the room grew still. Marcus felt something ancient in that silence, a connection that reached beyond uniforms, beyond laws, into the very marrow of human dignity. He did not rush forward, he did not shout. He simply knelt, lowering himself until his eyes aligned with hers. For the first time, she saw not just an officer, not just another adult who might overlook her pain, but a presence that radiated safety without words. The others spoke, rapid orders, commands, demands, but Marcus stayed silent. He knew silence could be louder than chaos. He inspected the cage, running his hand across the cold iron bars. The girl's fingers brushed against his, trembling but reaching for warmth. Her skin was rough, raw, torn. He clenched his jaw to keep from trembling, his mind pulled to another time, another place, Afghanistan, the night the convoy never returned. The cries of children pulled from rubble, the way their eyes reflected the same mixture of terror and fragile hope he now saw in this girl. He remembered carrying a boy with a broken leg for miles under fire. He remembered promising himself that if he survived, he would never ignore the voiceless. And here it was, the promise returning, demanding to be kept. She whispered something, barely audible, a single word, fractured and broken. Help. He looked at her and finally spoke, not loud, not commanding, but steady, almost sacred. You're safe now. But safety, Marcus knew, was not so easily granted. The walls seemed to close in with every moment. He glanced around the basement, the chains, the filth, the marks on the floor that spoke of others who had suffered here, and above them silence. Whoever had done this was gone, or worse, waiting. The officers scrambled to cut the lock. It refused to yield. The girl whimpered, pressing herself against the bars as though trying to melt through them. Marcus stood, his face hardening. He didn't need bolt cutters. He had carried doors off their hinges in deserts where death whispered in every corner. He wrapped his hands around the lock, bracing himself, and with a force born not of muscle but of memory and will, he ripped it free. The cage door swung open with a groan that sounded like the house itself sighing in relief. The girl stumbled forward, collapsing into his arms. She buried her face in his chest, And for a moment the soldier inside him returned. The one who carried children to safety. The one who had seen too many never make it home. The other officers shifted awkwardly, unsure whether to touch, to comfort, to act. Silence filled the room again. But this silence was different. It was heavy with judgment, not toward the girl, but toward the bystanders who had allowed such places to exist, the neighbors who might have heard and said nothing, the systems that failed to see her until now. Marcus carried her up the stairs, every step deliberate. When they emerged into daylight, the crowd outside gasped. Neighbors drawn by flashing lights and sirens stared as the small figure clung to him. Some lowered their eyes ashamed, some whispered excuses, and some simply stood still, struck by the sight of one man carrying not just a child, but the weight of truth. She did not cry anymore. Her tears had given way to a strange stillness, a trust she had not felt in years. She knew nothing of his past, nothing of the men he had buried, the deserts he had walked, or the promises he had whispered into the night. She only knew the heartbeat against her cheek, the steady rhythm of someone who would not let her fall. Reporters later would ask him what he thought in that moment. His answer was simple, almost too simple for them to print. Some cages are visible, some aren't, but freedom is owed to every soul, no matter how small. The girl was taken to safety, wrapped in blankets, surrounded by voices that promised her healing. But for Marcus, the healing was something else entirely. In saving her, he felt the echo of his brothers in arms, the ones who had fought and fallen for the same word she had whispered, help. Weeks later, the trial began. The man who had caged her sat in silence, his arrogance withering under the weight of evidence and testimony. The courtroom grew still as Marcus entered, not as an officer, but as a witness. He did not raise his voice. He did not deliver speeches. He simply looked at the man and then at the jury and let silence speak for him. Sometimes silence is the loudest form of justice. When the verdict was read, the girl clutched his hand. Her eyes still carried shadows, but they also carried something new, light. And as the courtroom emptied, Marcus whispered to her words she would never forget. Strength isn't about how loud you fight. It's about how long you carry others, even in silence. The story spread, not because of noise, but because of what it stirred in people's hearts. Communities began asking harder questions. Strangers lit candles in silent vigils, and children, once afraid of shadows, learned that even in the darkest basements, hope could be carried up into the light. The truth was revealed, and it was devastating. But in that truth lay a reminder that heroes do not always wear medals or shout commands. Sometimes they wear silence like armor, carrying broken souls until they can walk again. Marcus Hale walked away without fanfare, without applause. He blended back into the quiet, because that is where he belonged. But his story lingered, a testament that when dignity meets injustice, silence can roar louder than any cry. And somewhere, a little girl slept without chains for the first time in years, dreaming not of cages, but of freedom. If you are hearing this story now, carry it with you. Let it remind you that there are unseen battles happening around us every day. Some cries go unheard until someone chooses to listen. If you believe respect, silent strength, and unseen heroes still matter, share this story. And tell us where you are listening from, because every voice that refuses to stay silent becomes part of the light.